In April 1997, the ethnologist Peter Lerche is alarmed by an appeal for help. Grave robbers were plundering a burial site dating to pre-Columbian times, and many of the mummies had been left in the rain, unprotected. Now there is no time to lose. Lerche organizes a rescue expedition, and they set off up the mountain from Lemebamba. Their destination is the Laguna de los Condores, the Lagoon of the Condors. Local farmers have discovered a previously unknown burial site at an altitude of 2,600 meters, and the team, headed by the German-Peruvian Lerche, hopes to preserve it. The grave robbers have been busy, and the place is a shocking sight. Many of the sarcophagi have been smashed, the graves devastated, and there are fragments of Chachapoya mummies scattered around. The rescuers decide to perform an emergency excavation. In the end, they manage to transport over 200 mummies to the provincial capital. Today, the dead from the Lagoon of the Condors are kept in Lemebamba. The bodies were originally sewn inside sacks in a crouching position. After being excavated, some of the mummies were examined at the University of Vienna. These people died before the Spanish arrived. However, the surprising thing is that they showed traces of diseases which had been assumed to arrive in South America with the Europeans. In Göttingen, paleopathologist Professor Schulz performs research. He attempts to obtain information from the mortal remains of our ancestors about the sicknesses they suffered and the causes of their deaths, and the extraordinarily large extent of tuberculosis among the Chachapoya arouses his interest too.
Here we have a lesion which is typical for tuberculosis. The structure is ulcerated and eaten away. And these typical changes in bone structure caused by tuberculosis were found in skeletons and mummies of the Chachapoya, which is, of course, extremely curious, because we now have evidence that the disease was present in the Chachapoya population to a significant degree, even in the time before Columbus.
At the same time, evidence of tuberculosis alone does not prove there was transatlantic contact with the Chachapoya before Columbus. Ancient traces of the disease have also been found in other areas of South America.
The cases of tuberculosis we've so far been able to prove among the Chachapoya really do correspond to cases that we know from the classical period. If these people were the descendants of people who came from the Old World, that would be a possible explanation. And we could go further, suggesting that maybe the disease found its way to the New World by this route at a relatively early stage.
Wherever the people who constructed Cuelap came from, why did they build such a massive fortress here anyway? Peter Lerche suggests that Cuelap was a bulwark against invaders from the lowland regions, to provide protection against neighboring tribes who suffered from starvation during the regular droughts.
Archaeologists have found more than 50 skeletons here with skulls that were smashed in.
Were the victims attackers or defenders? The fatal injuries could have been caused by axes or slingshots. One thing is certain, they died violent deaths.
That frontier can be often a place of lots of jockeying for position, for who gets to trade with who gets the wealth, who gets to occupy the site at the trailhead, who gets this much take, who gets to be the middleman. And so I'm sure that there was a great deal of internal politicking, shuffling, squabbling, and probably bloodshed.
The administrative center of the province of Chachapoya today deals in precious metals and drugs, but the proceeds are invested elsewhere. collection of mummies in the local archaeological museum also seems slightly dusty. But anthropologists here are gathering important information about the fate of the Chachapoya and about their origins.
This mummy is one of a family. It's a 25-year-old woman with her 6-year-old child and her husband. The holes in the skull, 3 in the back of the head and 1 in the forehead, appear to have been made during wartime.
Again and again they find indications of unnatural causes of death, traces of murder and violence.
The Chachapoya had the reputation of being an extremely warlike people, and they used slingshots as their main weapon, both to defend themselves against attack and to attack their enemies.
They used slingshots, which differed completely from those used by the other tribes in Peru. Once again, the trail leads us back to the old world, to Majorca. Here we find a world champion on his way to a training session, a king among stone slingers. He is the Balearics champion, with a fine record of direct hits. But his rivals are working hard, so Juan Caballero spends all his free time practicing. Professor Gifhorn has brought the champion a reconstructed original Chachapoya slingshot from Peru, almost 10,000 kilometers away. When this is compared with the traditional slingshot from Majorca, the expert is startled to discover that the two are practically identical. Even the special way of fastening the loop around the projectile is exactly the same. Juan remembers that his ancestors used to wrap the slingshots around their heads. The Chachapoya also had the habit of proudly wearing their slingshots to adorn their heads, but this custom has died out now. Celtic warriors did have the ability to sail across the Atlantic 2,000 years ago. Together with the survivors of Carthage, the former superpower, who were forced to flee from the Roman legions, people with the courage of those who have nothing to lose. Refugees full of hope, of finding a new home on the other side of the ocean.